Have you ever felt like you were in love with someone, but at the same time being emotionally devoured from the inside out? Have you ever been drawn in by a gentle look, kind words, only to realize later that the same eyes made you feel small, weak, and somehow always in the wrong? If you've ever been in a relationship where you constantly doubt your emotions, your memory, or even your own worth, this isn't just about love, it's about psychological manipulation. Today, I'm exposing the 7 dangerous stages of a narcissistic relationship. Stages no one warns you about because they happen silently, subtly, and with disturbing precision. From the dreamy soulmate phase to being discarded, smeared, and reeled back in with a tearful apology, none of it is random. It's a cyclical emotional manipulation strategy designed to control you before you even realize your freedom is gone. If you've ever asked yourself, am I being emotionally abused? If you've ever felt exhausted for reasons you can't explain, then this video may be your first step toward clarity and taking back your power. Stick with me until the end, because I'll share one powerful awakening question that everyone who's ever loved the wrong person needs to hear. And if you find this video valuable, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss more content on healing, awareness, and how to protect yourself from toxic manipulation. 1. Stage 1. The assault of love. You walk into the relationship and suddenly everything feels like a dream. You're pulled into their world, where every conversation makes you feel understood, where texts light up your heart, and every compliment convinces you that you're one of a kind. To you, it doesn't just feel like love. It feels like once-in-a-lifetime connection, intense, profound, and overwhelmingly safe. But behind this cinematic experience lies a carefully calculated strategy, what's often called love bombing. Not the flashy kind with flowers and fancy gifts, but something far more insidious, soul baiting. The covert narcissist doesn't dazzle you with romantic overload. They enchant you with emotional depth. They talk about healing, pain, childhood trauma, emotional connection. They present themselves as emotionally intelligent, spiritually grounded, wounded yet wise. And you, kind-hearted and empathetic, lean in. They listen to your secrets. They mirror your hopes. They comfort your fears, not because they want to know you, but because they want to own the version of you who feels finally seen. That's the first trap. You start craving not them, but the feeling they so perfectly manufacture. It's not the person that hooks you, it's the illusion of emotional safety. They're not feeding your soul, they're feeding your dependency. They give you presents, good morning texts, late night calls, gentle check-ins that slowly wire your nervous system into trusting them, needing them. But here's what you must understand, that love isn't about you, it's about them, about how they appear in your eyes, about them crafting the role of the deep soulful one. They bait your wounds, mirror your longings, and harvest your vulnerability to ensure you see them as irreplaceable. This isn't intimacy, it's programming. It's a subtle, systematic emotional conditioning. They study your softness, they learn what soothes you, they weaponize empathy as a hook, and when you start to feel uneasy, they dial it up. I miss you. No one's ever understood me like you do. You're my home. These aren't declarations of love. They're psychological anchors. You begin to lower your guard. You move faster than usual. You take risks, trust quicker, open wider, because they've convinced you that this time you found something rare. But you didn't find love. You found a performance designed to possess you. The scariest part? You won't realize any of this while it's happening. You'll think you're falling in love, when in fact, you're walking into a trap disguised as connection. And if this is resonating, if you feel seen by these words, I want you to know this. You are not weak. You were never naive. You were targeted. Your empathy became their entry point. This isn't love. This is emotional colonization. In stage 1, it isn't about blossoming. It's the bridge to psychological captivity. 2. Stage 2. Emotional manipulation, when love becomes a tool for control. After weeks or months of being showered with affection and sweet words, you begin to feel something off. It's not a dramatic shift, it's subtle, more like a soft dissonance, a quiet discomfort you can't quite name, a strange comment that makes you question yourself, a reaction that leaves you feeling guilty, a situation where you find yourself explaining, even though you didn't do anything wrong. This is no longer the phase of adoration. This is where they start to reshape your reality, slowly, silently, and with surgical precision, and you won't even realize it's manipulation because it doesn't arrive as a threat. It comes dressed as care. You share a small win. Rather than praise, they smile faintly and say, "I'm happy for you, but don't get cocky." You wear a new outfit. They don't insult you, they just mutter, "I like it better when you don't try so hard." You express your emotions. They don't argue, they say, "You're just too sensitive. No one else would take it that way." This is the most dangerous form of manipulation, when they plant seeds of self-doubt in your mind under the guise of concern. No yelling, no overt shaming, just a consistent stream of subtle signals that make you question who you are. You start thinking, maybe I am too sensitive, maybe I do ask for too much, maybe they're right, I need to change. And that's when you begin to drift away from who you truly are, to become the version of yourself that's more palatable to them. They don't command, they just suggest. They don't blame, they analyze. But behind that soft-spoken tone lies a quiet power structure, one where they are always the emotionally stable one and you are always adjusting. You start filtering your words, you hold back your thoughts, you walk on eggshells, not because you're wrong, but because you're afraid to disrupt their mood. This is emotional manipulation through sophistication, where control is built not through fear, but through calculated kindness. And once you've internalized that cycle of self-rejectment, they no longer need to lift a finger. You'll do it to yourself. You'll become smaller, softer, easier. This is what many survivors don't realize. It doesn't take shouting, tears, or name-calling to break a person down. It only takes enough moments where you question your own worth, and you're already under their influence. And when you finally feel drained or confused, they will comfort you with the same tenderness they once used to hook you. You'll think, they still loved me, but in truth, they're reinforcing the emotional cage you can't see. 3. Stage 3. Devaluation, the silent erosion of self-worth. The devaluation stage doesn't arrive with a bang. It arrives through a process. There is no dramatic turning point, only erosion. Gradual, relentless. And the most devastating part? The victim often doesn't realize it's happening until they no longer recognize themselves. A narcissist doesn't need to destroy you with direct aggression, they only need to make you doubt yourself, one moment at a time. This is their method. They turn the affection and admiration from the early stages into a mechanism of control. At first, they praised your independence, your passion, your uniqueness. But slowly, those same traits are reframed as flaws. You begin hearing suggestions dressed as concern but loaded with criticism. You've got great potential, if only you weren't so impulsive. I admire your strength, but sometimes you overpower people. You should learn to soften up. People might find you difficult. There's no shouting, no insults, just enough suggestion to make you second-guess yourself. And from that self-doubt, you begin to self-correct. Why is this so psychologically dangerous? Because once someone is led to chronically question their emotional validity and personal judgment, they begin to rely on external feedback to define their identity. This is the psychological breeding ground for anxiety disorders, depression, and complex PTSD. You stop acting from internal desire. You start adjusting based on how they might react. You no longer dress to express yourself. You dress to avoid critique. You don't speak your truth. You monitor your tone. This is the anatomy of a distorted relationship. One person controls the narrative, and the other loses the ability to define themselves. What makes this more insidious is that it doesn't happen in overt conflict. It happens in silences, in strategic indifference, in emotional withdrawals that punish but never name the crime. They don't need to say, "You're not good enough." They simply pull back their attention, their affection, their approval. Every time you express a part of yourself that doesn't serve their image, every expectation they place on how you speak, dress, behave, or connect is framed as for your own good. But in reality, it's a quiet campaign of identity erosion, where you're slowly molded into something more convenient. By this stage, your self-esteem isn't shattered, it's been worn down, and you, exhausted, keep trying harder. Not because you love them more, but because you've been made to believe you might not be lovable in any other way. Clinically, this is the onset of trauma bonding, where victims empathize with their abuser as a survival mechanism in emotionally unstable environments. You start thinking for them, justifying their actions, defending them, even as you're being erased. Stage 4. Role reversal, when the victim becomes the perpetrator in their story. This stage doesn't begin with an explosion, it begins with accumulation. After a prolonged period of emotional erosion, subtle devaluation, and calculated control, you, the victim, begin to react. Maybe you raise your voice for the first time, break down in tears, or dare to set a boundary and say, "I can't take this anymore." But, to the narcissist, this is not a red flag, it's an opportunity. In that moment, the entire story shifts. You, once the wounded partner, are now unstable, overreactive, emotionally volatile, and they, who inflicted the confusion and damage, step into the role of the misunderstood saint, the one who tried everything. They begin rewriting your story in a way that serves their image. "I did all I could, but they were impossible to love." This isn't just an emotional overreaction. It's a deliberate psychological tactic called role reversal. It turns your natural and human response to abuse into ammunition against you. They don't document the months of silence, the gaslighting, the passive aggression. They highlight the one moment you snapped and make it your entire character. Psychologically, this is one of the most dangerous phases of narcissistic abuse. It leaves the victim in a state of cognitive collapse. You begin to doubt your own memories. Maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I did push too hard. You may even seek therapy, not to heal, but to fix yourself for the person who broke you. And while you're doubting your reality, they approach you gently. "I know you're struggling, let me help you through this." But that offer isn't compassion, it's a final form of control, to keep you dependent and to reinforce the false narrative where they are the savior and you are the broken one. Role reversal is not just a lie, it's a full psychological reframe of reality. And the worst part? It often works. Friends, family, even professionals may buy into it because the narcissist got there first. They shaped the narrative before you even realize there was a war being waged on your identity. From a clinical perspective, this phase often leads to identity confusion, emotional withdrawal, and social isolation. Victims find themselves unable to explain what happened because what happened wasn't visible. It was embedded in tone, in withdrawal, in silence. And now, with the roles reversed, you're not just fighting to heal, you're fighting to be believed. In short, Stage 4 is not just a performance, it's a highly strategic manipulation campaign, one designed not only to protect the narcissist's image, but to dismantle your sense of self from the inside out. Once you no longer trust your own voice, they no longer need to control you. You control yourself. With the guilt and self-doubt they implanted. Stage 5. Discard. When you no longer serve a purpose, if the earlier stages were about controlling you from the inside, the discard phase is when the narcissist decides you are no longer useful. But don't be mistaken. They don't leave because you're not good enough. They leave because you've started to see through them. For a narcissist, you're not a person with emotions and dignity. You're a supply, a source of admiration, compliance, and ego validation. When you begin asking questions, stop reacting on cue, set boundaries or resist their false apologies, you become useless to them, and so they withdraw. But not like a mature adult ending a relationship. They leave with coldness and cruelty, disappearing without warning, without explanation. One day you're the love of their life, the next you're blocked, ignored, erased. This isn't confusion, it's punishment, designed to make you feel small, abandoned, and desperate for them to return. Psychology calls this emotional abandonment, and it leaves a brutal emptiness, not because you lost them, but because you feel severed from yourself. You begin doubting your worth. Was I really unlovable? If I had done more, would they have stayed? You replay the past, searching for logic in their behavior, when in truth, that behavior is the clearest sign of emotional abuse. More disturbingly, some narcissists don't just leave, they immediately show up with someone new. They flaunt this relationship to make you feel replaceable, like old furniture, and if you express pain, react, or break down, they use that to validate their narrative. See, I was right to leave. For healthy individuals, breakups are painful but part of growth. For narcissists, discard isn't closure, it's a tactic, a tool to control emotions, destabilize you, and sometimes set up a future return when they need to reprise their old role. So the most important thing to remember during this stage is this: they didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because you were finally strong enough not to be controlled. 6. Stage 6. Smear campaign, when truth is twisted into a performance. After the discard phase, if you choose silence and retreat, they might leave you alone. But if you dare to speak the truth, if you share your experience, begin to rebuild your life with clarity and strength, the narcissist will enter the next phase, the smear campaign. This isn't just gossip, it's a personal PR operation with a clear goal: to redefine you in a way that removes their accountability and preserves their good person image in the eyes of others. In clinical psychology, we call this social perception management, a process where manipulators attempt to control how others see them and see you. They don't tell the truth, they tell a version of it that benefits them. They'll say things like, "I tried everything, but she was too unstable. I loved him, but he was so controlling and needy. I just wanted peace." But they thrived on drama. These statements aren't meant to heal. They're meant to cast doubt on you, isolate you from your support network, and erode your trust in your own voice. Worse, narcissists are skilled at mixing partial truths with emotional distortion, making their version sound reasonable. They include details that are technically true, but stripped of context. They'll say you once lashed out or cried, but omit the months of silent punishment, gaslighting, and emotional destruction that pushed you to that point. And when others hear these scattered fragments, they naturally side with the one who seems calm, the narcissist. Many survivors experience a profound psychological collapse during this stage. They don't just lose a relationship, they lose their credibility, their community, and sometimes even their career, because their voice is doubted, dismissed, or worse, framed as vengeful or unstable. The pain of not being believed after surviving such subtle emotional abuse is called secondary trauma, a wound that runs even deeper than the first. For the narcissist, the smear campaign is how they clean the crime scene after the emotional manipulation is done. They don't accept the truth, because the truth forces them to take responsibility, so they rewrite the narrative, where they are the victim and you are the problem. And here's what you must remember: the people most vulnerable to this manipulation aren't you. They're the ones who don't understand narcissistic abuse. That's why instead of defending yourself point by point, invest your energy in rebuilding your inner strength, reconnecting with trusted support and standing firm in your truth. The truth doesn't need everyone to believe in it to exist. It only needs you to be willing to stand beside it. 7. Stage 7. Re-Hoovering, when the cycle returns with a new mask. After discarding you, after smearing your name and distorting your image in the eyes of others and even in your own mind, some narcissists don't stop. When they sense that you're beginning to stand firm, reclaim peace, and rebuild your sense of self, they come back, not out of love, not out of remorse, but because of their deepest need, control. This stage is called Re-Hoovering, named after the Hoover vacuum, because it mirrors their attempt to suck you back into their sphere of influence where they once manipulated you successfully. But this time, they don't return as the blamer or the victim. They return as someone transformed. They'll say the words you once longed to hear. I've been doing a lot of thinking. You're the only one who ever really got me. I've started therapy, and I know I hurt you. All wrapped in sincere tones, regretful eyes, even new behaviors that make it seem like they've truly changed. But remember, this is not genuine awakening. This is psychological strategy. They come back not because they've realized your worth, but because they can't stand losing their control. Your silence disturbs them. Your emotional detachment removes their script. And so they try again, with a more emotional, polished, and healed version of themselves. Psychologically, seasoned manipulators often test former sources because they know one thing. Old relationships hold memories, bonds, empathy, the tools they can use to emotionally re-engage you. And if you're still healing, if part of you still craves a clean ending, if you haven't fully understood the manipulation cycle, you may feel moved. You may ask, what if this time it's real? But pause and ask yourself, are they returning because they love you, or because they can't stand that you no longer serve their ego? Re-Hoovering is the ultimate test for survivors. If you're not grounded in reality, you may go back, and the cycle begins again. Idealization, manipulation, devaluation, role reversal, discard, smear, and hoover. Each round more refined, the words softer, but the wounds deeper. So if they return, you must be more clear-eyed than ever. They are not coming back because you deserve better. They are coming back because you're slipping out of reach, and to a narcissist, that's unacceptable. A relationship with a narcissist doesn't begin with destruction. It begins with enchantment, and it's precisely because of how special they make you feel in the beginning that the manipulation that follows becomes so hard to recognize and even more painful to endure. Each stage, from love bombing, manipulation, devaluation, role reversal, discard, smear, to re-hoovering, is not just a behavior but a psychological strategy designed to control you at the deepest level inside your own perception. And when you finally wake up, when you start saying no to the script, they don't just lose control, you break a system of power built on silence, self-abandonment, and forgetting who you are. Remember, you're not overreacting, you're not too sensitive, you are someone recovering from a form of abuse so subtle, most people never see it. And if you're in any one of these stages, know this, you are not alone. Millions have made it through, and so will you. Keep holding your boundaries, keep choosing truth, and above all, keep choosing yourself.